Hey guys, I am going to be answering the discussion 8 questions that we had assigned to us this week. I'm going to be reading off my laptop because I have written out my answers before I made this video. So if you see me looking down, that's what I'm doing. And I'm just going to list off the questions one by one. So the first one is, how do stereotypes affect the portrayal of Latinx individuals and communities in the media? I kind of grouped this one with the second question, which is, what are the consequences of these stereotypes on audience perception and societal attitudes? So stereotypes in the media have a really negative impact on the reporter that's, reporting the story, but also the Latino community at large. As we have seen in the media, historically, Latinos have been represented mostly in stories of crime and immigration, which have impacted society's perception on Latinos as just immigrants or just criminals. And we saw that rhetoric really explode with the 2016 election when Donald Trump was calling Latinos rapists, criminals, and all sorts of things, right? So in this sense, we see how the portrayal that media plays a part in, the part that media plays in portraying Latinos has greater effects other than just the stories that they write. Beyond the stories that they write, it has impacts on how society views Latinos at large and how policies are made and how rhetoric is created into these policies. And now we're seeing a lot of anti-Latino rhetoric because of the stereotypes that have been placed on our community. So I want to, aside from reducing like really complex and successful people into just criminals or immigrants or other harmful stereotypes about our community, I wanted to bring up a local broadcast reporter here in Tucson, Arizona. She's a Latina reporter. She went to Cronkite. She has a high education. She's a mom. She is an amazing person, and she's Latina. And she's one of the handful of Latinas in the broadcast scene here in Tucson at KGA 9. And she posts her packages on Instagram. And whenever she posts her packages, I like to go through the comment section just to see what people have to say, because undoubtedly I will go into her comment section and there will be 2, 3, 4 comments on her appearance or on something that she said or how she said it. And it's become kind of like a game to me, like, okay, what are they gonna comment on this time? So recently she had posted a video of her in a red suit with a red lip. And someone in the comments told her that she was too loud and that she needed to tone it down. And this comment feeds into that stereotype that Latinas are loud. And while some people are like, oh, well, that's not necessarily a negative stereotype, it is. Any stereotypes in our communities, I say, are bad stereotypes, because then it feeds into this narrative that all Latinos are like this, or all Latinas are loud, all Latinos are fiery. And that has negative consequences on our community. And even though her appearance had nothing to do with the story she was reporting on, people still commented on it. At one point in that same video, she's reporting on a fire. She turns her head back to point at the fire, and she has a tiny little tattoo right here. And someone had commented, and I think it's because of the tattoo that someone commented like something about her looking like a chola. That's another stereotype, because she's educated, she's a reporter, she has a job, she's a mom, and yet you want to stereotype her as a chola despite not knowing her, and despite the video not having anything to do with her appearance, with her identity, or with her acting like a chola, you know what I mean? So these are stereotypes that Latinas, Latinos, Latine reporters, and other people in the community have to constantly deal with. There was nothing in her appearance other than her Latinidad that could have incited these comments. And I would be really interested to see the comment section of other maybe white male reporters and see if there are people commenting on their appearance, on the way they talk, on the way they report news. I would just be interested to see, because personally, in my opinion, I think I would not find those comments. And this is not just like a woman thing, it's also being a Latina that adds on to those stereotypes, right? So that was kind of my answer to the first and second question, but I'm gonna expand on the second question here with, what are the consequences of these stereotypes on audience perception and societal attitudes? They are biased views on our community. As I mentioned already before, these stereotypes have the power to lead into the mainstream narrative of who we are, and that can affect policies, laws that affect our community. For example, something off the top of my head, the Lake and Riley Act. It stereotypes our community into thinking like, okay, oh my God, let me look up the Lake and Riley Act.
Basically, where I was going with this is that the Lake and Riley Act is legislation that came about because of the overwhelming mainstream narrative that Latinos are criminals and should not be here. It is literally the manifestation of these hateful stereotypes against our community, and it shows the devastating and real life impacts that these stereotypes can have.
So there was a reason I brought this act up. And so the last question is, in what ways do stereotypes limit opportunities for authentic representation and diverse storytelling in the broadcast industry? When newsrooms lack Latinx reporters, editors, producers, CEOs, whatever position, Latinx communities are often filtered through a perspective that is not as authentic. Which can lead to oversimplified narratives. For example, you know, if my perspective as someone from a mixed status family on immigration is going to be widely different than a reporter who is not an immigrant, who is not a person of color, and I will be able to use my experiences to navigate my reporting and to maybe bring attention to some things that maybe mainstream media doesn't bring attention to, or talking to certain groups or building and fomenting that trust with certain groups that will get me a different angle on a story. So when we don't have Latinx representation in the newsroom, the ability for us to authentically and genuinely represent the Latinx community plummets, because they're not coming from a place of common understanding, of common experiences, of common shared cultural, I don't want to say values, but cultural understanding of one another. Even if, for example, even if I'm Mexican American, I can still connect to someone that's from Venezuela or El Salvador, because we not only share a language, but we might share some experiences of like, oh, our family does things a certain way, or oh, we all do like a sobremesa and we talk and we have these experiences and we're very family oriented, etc., etc. A lot of values in Latin America are similar. So having Latinx reporters on there can expand the narrative of who Latinos are and what Latinos do, and also the coverage. I talked to, for my master's project, I talked to a lot of reporters, and they said that in like the 70s, 80s, despite a push for more Latinos in newsrooms, the people that were directing, like for example, editors that were assigning the stories, they were assigning stories that had a very filtered perspective, whereas once reporters were able to pick and choose the stories they wanted to cover, they started covering stories about community, stories about people in our community that are doing great things, business owners. The narrative changed then from reporting on Latinos only when it comes to immigration and crime to reporting on Latinos as a community that supports one another, that are business owners, that create change in the community. So the narrative changed when Latino reporters were able to pick what stories they wanted to write. Without diverse representation in the newsroom, journalists risks reinforcing systemic biases and failing in its responsibility to serve all segments of the public equitably. It's essential to increase Latinx participation in all levels of journalism, not just for accurate and inclusive reporting, but also to build that trust with communities that have been historically marginalized and historically misrepresented. And then hopefully from there, with the media changing that narrative on who Latinos are, it can extend to how society views Latinos, and it can extend to the laws and policies that impact our community, right? And so those are my final thoughts on this discussion. It might have been really long. I definitely cut it because there were parts where I lost my train of thought, but I hope that everyone else has great insights and that we can continue our conversation in the discussion posts. So yeah.